So, Milo Yiannopolis recently wrote an article about how the left chose Islam over gays and thus Orlando happened. Now, as a liberal atheist, while I agree with him in certain sentiments as a liberal atheist, well, Schwantz, obviously that means you own a fedora. Sorry about that, where was I? Yeah, we're getting rid of this fucking thing. Oh, as a liberal atheist, I agree with him that the left has to stick by its liberal principles regarding Islam. But he's completely incorrect in his assertion that, quote, the right is a greater ally against this barbaric, dark age ideology than the left ever will be. Ah, yes, the right, who have enacted all sorts of religious freedom acts in order to make homosexuals less than an actual person, and includes the Christian right, of which were made up of pastors who have huge influence over in Central African countries such as Uganda, who ironically make laws that will put to death or kill people just for being a homosexual. They're sure better than the people that fought for marriage equality, anti-discrimination laws, and repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The problem that both Milo and I have against the left is that they will side with Muslims over their core liberal principles, mainly because the right has policies that are Islamophobic and xenophobic in regards to Islam. I'm not being an Islamophobe when I say that women shouldn't have to wear beekeeper suits or be submissive to their husbands, when being homosexual shouldn't have you killed, and freedom of religion is a good thing and not punishable by death. Ted Cruz, however, is being an Islamophobe when he calls for the complete and total surveillance of all mosques. Donald Trump is being an Islamophobe when he calls for a total and complete shutdown on Muslims entering the United States. Not to mention, how the fuck would you even enforce that? Brown not allowed? Would people have to take a religious test? Sir, are you a Muslim? No. Sir, is that a prayer rug as your carry-on? Nah, this thing, it's a flying magic carpet. So then why are you getting on a plane? Aw, fuck. I'd argue that the left is much more harsh on Islam than gays. President Obama has killed more Muslims in drone strikes against militants and unfortunately collateral damage against innocent civilians as well than the combined death total of both the San Bernardino and the Orlando shootings. I'm pretty sure Obama hasn't authorized the execution of any homosexual person just because they were gay, but these people were killed just because they're Muslims and they espouse ridiculous fucking beliefs. He's also ordered airstrikes in Syria against ISIS and has decimated their forces by at least 20% with the last totals. In fact, this is actually probably a decent recruiting tool for those that hate us, which brings us back to the main issue here. How do we combat the idea of Islamic principles which are completely incompatible with Western values? Well, we could declare war on an entire religion, Islam, and countries that practice Sharia law, which will also alienate some of our allies in the Middle East. Not that I actually mind telling Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other dictators to go shit in a hat. However, the past 3 times there was military intervention in the area, yeah, things didn't work out so well. Afghanistan is having problems with the Taliban controlling public domains. Iraq turned into what is now ISIS, and the right has been so concerned about what happened in Libya on September 11, 2012, they don't give a shit about what's actually happening there now, which is ISIS is coming in and taking over swaths of territory in Libya. So I'm pretty sure that going in guns blazing will not only cost American lives, but as we've seen in the more recent past, doesn't really work all that well. Instead, Muslims have got to sort this shit out on their own by allowing their nations to become more secular and allowing things to be questioned. They need to hear it from their own kind, not the other or their mother. Seriously, Mom, I know that the weather is bad. You don't have to text me to be careful driving anytime your app shows a little raindrop on it. So, does that mean we just leave them the fuck alone and let them do what they want to do? Not exactly, because these countries completely suppress any free thought. So in that vein, we have to prop up these moderate Muslims or Muslims that are willing to speak out against these barbaric practices and willing to become more secular. These people can't speak out in their own countries because of fear of being either put to death or thrown in jail, so that means that they're going to have to do it from somewhere else, which comes back to Trump Trump's immigration stance? No people from these particular countries. Well, if we can't accept people from these countries, that means that the people that want to get out and want to speak out are going to be forced not to because we decided, hey, we don't want you motherfuckers in our country, instead of having them come over to our country and speak out against the atrocities that their religion propagates. So, no, the policy of Donald Trump of keeping everybody out is actually hurting us more than it's helping us. Remember what James Franco said, they hate us because they ain't us. How do you expect them to be more like us if they're trapped inside of that bubble? As we've seen with other religions in the past, having people being assimilated into more secular societies allows people to have the conversations about the barbaric principles that Milo wants us to have. Think about this. The Orlando shooter's parents were very strict Islamists, and he is a second wave of immigrant into our society. Their son, while obviously echoing the radical beliefs that he learned from his father, also struggled with potentially being a closet homosexual, if you believe some of the things that his ex-wife has said. And based on his photos and other testimony from people that knew him, was definitely more assimilated than his parents. Imagine if he didn't have bipolar disorder or these other mental health issues, which probably could be pinned on his father, who was definitely trying to sell out to the fundamentalist Muslims in order to get more subs on YouTube. View whore! So what if this guy isn't crazy and then he has kids of their own? Those grandkids, which are now third-generation immigrants, are almost more certainly to be acceptable and receptive of a Western culture because they're born into it. If they're born over in the Middle East, they're going to be completely brainwashed from day zero with these Islamic principles that are completely incompatible with our Western values. They're much better off in a Western society than a fundamentalist Muslim country with Sharia law, and that doesn't happen if we have Trump's policy of no immigrants from that region. So no, the right is actually not doing more to help this situation out. They are keeping moderate Muslims or people that might want to speak out or want to be more secular in the regions that they are, so that this cycle of hatred will continue ad infinitum. Not to mention, economics has a huge influence over religion in that if you're poor, you are way more likely to turn to religion for your answers than if you are well off. A lot of these refugees are males that are looking for work, and if they get it provided to them, they're less likely to turn to their religion because they're much more well off. If we leave people in these impoverished nations that they want to escape, this cycle of fundamentalist Islam is just going to continue because you're more likely to be influenced by religion if you're poor versus if you got a lot of Skrilla. As the saying goes, mo money, mo time you're not spending on religion. So how do we win this fight against the terrorists? We have to win the culture war against them. We have to prove that our Western values are better than Sharia law and their Islamic principles. But you can't win a culture war if other people don't get to experience your culture. We need to assist Muslims that are afraid to speak out against these barbaric principles and want to become more secular by giving them a voice, not putting up a barrier between us and them. Of course, there's going to be issues with assimilation. See, Cologne and Sweden, and of course, this shit should not be tolerated because we have Western values and we will not tolerate intolerance. But hey, I can understand why Muslim men think that they deserve sex from women whenever they want. I mean, how else do you think they get laid with that I haven't bathed or groomed in weeks look? Any losses in the short term will be made up in the long term since we are forcing Muslims to take a look in the mirror and say, these ideologies that you have do not belong in a modern society. Get with the fucking program, guys. For every jihadist that celebrates one of these terrorist attacks, there's probably many more Muslims that go, yeah, I don't want any fucking part of that bullshit. Use this sympathy to our advantage, people. So, guys, let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and please try and be civil. I get called enough names in my normal videos as it is, and with this new format of this particular type of video, I don't know if it'll go over well or not, and this beepity bop that you see around here, that is the overlay for my podcast. I talk about subjects like this every week on the podcast that I co-host. It's called Triggered Podcast. It is at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We live stream it every Thursday on Stream Me. Check out the link in the description. I've been the Schwantz27, making like a fetus and heading out. Until next time.